100 years ago, at the end of the First World War, thousands of wounded and sick soldiers were transferred from prisoner of war camps to neutral Switzerland for internment. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, proposed it, the Swiss government organised it, and the warring nations paid for it. 7 million military personnel were taken prisoner during the Great War. Swiss doctors visited POW camps to select potential internees. The ICRC still has the records.
Les conditions de captivité ont pu se dégrader, notamment dans les pays qui formaient les puissances centrales, du fait du blocus qui avait été imposé à ces pays et qui faisait que l'approvisionnement en vivres était de plus en plus difficile.
Captain Eric Jackson of the Cheshire Regiment was seriously injured in the Battle of Audreny in Belgium and tried to escape from POW camps like this one on many occasions. His son Paddy tells us about one particular escape attempt.
He was chased by the Germans with dogs and one eventually caught up to him and he hit it on the nose, and he tells the story. And then he actually he caught a mouse while he was hiding for the day, and he cooked it and ate it for his soup. He called it a casserole. Yeah, he tried to escape and he was sort of be shut in a dungeon, no clothes hardly, for 10 degrees of minus 10 degrees, a foot of snow outside in the cold bits of one of the prison camps. You know, they were sort of old Prussian forts.
Susie Kershaw's grandfather, Captain Cyril Joliffe, also of the Cheshire Regiment, was not taken to Switzerland from a POW camp, but from a hospital. He'd sustained serious wounds at the Battle of Mons in August 1914.
It's a time when there was very little hygienic treatment and no antibiotics. And from what we know, by the time he got to Switzerland, he'd had about 12 operations.
Captain Joliffe was part of the contingent of 700 British prisoners of war who arrived in Châteaudet on the 30th of May 1916. As the internees entered Switzerland, they were surprised to be greeted by thousands of Swiss.
Oh, the receptions were really, really rapturous is the only way I can really describe it. People say that the whole village turned out, so young girls would wear their best traditional costumes, children would sing and dance to entertain, the choir would come, brass bands would come.
Afterwards, the soldiers were sent to the different hotels where they were billeted, like these ones in the Châteaudet area. Susie Kershaw wanted to find out where her grandfather had lived.
Oh, this is incredible. This is really incredible. Number 3. Chalet Jeta. Here it is.
So what do you think about seeing the chalet where your grandfather would have stayed?
Well, it's really exciting. Quite moving, really, and to see the view and how it must have felt to come here, whether he could walk even, whether he had to be helped to actually get here initially.
This is a picture of Sergeant Major William Henry Kitson, also interned in Châteaudet. His granddaughter Frances Burns is following his trail.
It was in the newspaper in Sheffield, you know, where they listed our men missing in action, and he was one of them. I think it was about 1915. Can you imagine what it would be like being told that someone was missing in action and having a small baby, which my grandmother did, and mourning? And when he came home from the war, he came home very much the sergeant major that he was, and he ran the family like a regiment. But at moments of tenderness, for example, when my mum was ill when she was a child, he used to share with her a little book of alpine flowers that he had pressed here in Châteaudet.
POWs were not allowed to leave the villages where they were interned, and boredom quickly set in. The Swiss came up with the idea of training them. Teachers were brought over from Britain.
So they could learn bookbinding, accounting, improve their literacy skills and numeracy skills. They could learn a foreign language. printing, even driving a car.
And then the wives and girlfriends were allowed to come and visit.
For those that were better off, the officers' wives and so on, they could afford to travel. Some of them even rented chalets and lived as a family during the time of the internment. But for the poorer soldiers, the ordinary private soldiers, they did not have the means.
Captain Jolliffe's wife came to join him, and their first child was born in Switzerland. This is his baptism certificate. And a newspaper article about the birth. 100 years on, Chateau Day is paying tribute to the Swiss who welcomed the soldiers into their villages and made the last years of the war bearable for them. A service at St. Peter's Church brought the relatives of the internees together. I asked military writer Peter Martin why it was important to remember what happened here a century ago.
Any of the events of the First and Second World War, which cost so many hundreds of thousands of lives, ought to be remembered not just for the sacrifice of the men who were killed or maimed, but also for the families who were themselves bereaved as a result. Napoleon said, strangely enough, that no greater sacrifice is made by any man than one who is maimed in the service of his country. So these internees who were badly wounded, most of them maimed, blinded, losing limbs and so on, made a great sacrifice short of dying for their country, and we should never forget them.